Hello, friends. Good evening. Today, I came across a very interesting question, quite a thought provoking question, spiritually thought provoking question. The question that is being raised, this one I actually came across an article written by somebody very well known to me. The person was actually raising the question of surrender to God. What is surrender to God? Now, uh, the reason why I am actually talking a little haltingly here, this is not something that can be answered lightly. It can be answered. It's not something that can be answered very lightly, casually, or in a very flippant fashion. Okay, this has to be addressed in some depth so that it makes sense to people. The concept is actually easy to talk about, but extremely difficult to practice. All that a common average man, individual, is expected to do in a very spiritual context is to strive towards reaching the goal of surrender, ultimate surrender to God, absolute surrender to God. But is it ever going to be possible for anybody to completely surrender to God? I'm sorry, I don't really think so at all, except unless the person, the individual, or great spiritual masters, spiritual gurus, very close to being considered even the God incarnate. For example, Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi of Tiruvannamalai, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and we have had spiritual sages. There have been so many in India. Let me not actually go into that. So now we are going to be talking only to the extent of what Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi's ultimate preachings were. It was actually self-inquiry, look into oneself. Okay. Now let's actually talk a little bit, come back to the concept of surrender. So the surrendering to God does not just mean you go to the temple, you pray to God, and you are surrendered. No. You just recite some slogas, you surrender. No. Surrendering to God is a very ultimate thing. That's an ultimate thing that has to come by years of practice. Practice of the surrendering itself. Because the surrendering would necessarily involve somebody to completely overcome one's what you call ego. Ego is nothing but a consciousness about yourself. When you are basically conscious of yourself, when you are conscious of what you do, what you have done, good and bad, people don't think in terms of bad, but they only think in terms of good when it actually comes to them. Okay? So there is no objective self-reflection, introspection. But still, so that ego interferes, it actually interferes in every walk of life, in every one of our actions, thought and deed. You are just not able to overcome the idea of I when you actually think about yourself. For example, I have given money to somebody today. Now, that has to be done with absolute humility. Humility means, that idea of I should not be there at all. Even when I am giving, I should thank myself that I am in a position to do that. God has put me in a position to do that. That has to be the kind of attitude, humility. That would actually mean the person has conquered ego to some extent. To some extent. Even when you actually think of your own actions, good and bad, when you are able to completely conquer your ego and do it, then there is humility is reflected. There it means to some extent you have surrendered to God. So surrendering can be seen in different facets. It's the implications are really very wide and vast and very deep. So unless somebody is able to conquer one's own ego, it's never going to be possible to completely surrender yourself to God. So, okay, what does a person, the question arises, what does a person who goes to temple every day pray to God? What does he do there? He is making an effort to surrender himself. That's actually the very preliminary minimal effort that every person has to do. Think about God. You can think about God. You don't really have to go to the temple. You can actually sit in a corner, think about God. You can be among a group of people singing bhajans, think about God. You can also go to the temple, think about God. So there are various ways of worship, thinking about God, the God consciousness, to deeply inculcate in yourself the spirit of God consciousness. Now you go to the temple, you pray. It makes you humble. It makes you humble. How? Because it reminds you that there is a power which is superior to yourself, omnipotent power. The power can do everything that you cannot do. So you are not the master of your own destiny. So there is some power that's actually guiding, determining things. That power we actually call God. Now you go to the temple, it's actually like, okay, if there is a very, very elder person who is just not in a position to move or is totally immobile, the person would like people to come and see them. So we actually go and see the person because the person is so helpless to move. I'm not equating God here with the helpless person. Don't get me wrong at all. But what I'm trying to say is, you just go to the person so that you yourself feel satisfied. You may be able to provide some good time to the person by talking, by being considerate, by being kind. But more than that, you really feel very satisfied with yourself that you have done something that you should be doing. So everything ultimately boils down to how you feel, how you perceive, what you exactly realize. Now when you go to the temple, is God going to be happy? God may or may not be happy, because God may not be satisfied with just you going to the temple. If otherwise, if all that the person is actually engaging in his day-to-day life is bad deeds, but still go to the temple, is God going to be happy with you? No. But you are making an effort. It is to actually satisfy your own. For some people, it is to satisfy their consciousness. See, people are basically so simple-minded. They feel they can actually do everything in the day, and in the evening they can go to the temple to God and pray to God. All the sins are going to be washed off. No, that's not the way it works. So people go to the temple for various reasons. The person that I know go to the temple has been going for a very, very long time, and he goes there with a lot of devotion. I know him very well. He goes there with a lot of devotion, dedication. He genuinely makes an effort to focus his attention on God. So all that is absolutely fine. But is he surrendering to God? No. Surrender comes in a totally different category. As I said, it can be best explained with a combination of spiritual and psychological explanation. It can be best talked about. Now, when you go to the temple, you pray to God, you become humble, you become conscious of a greater power, and you submit yourself. You submit yourself there for the moment, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. But then you come back, you forget the temple, you forget the God. The God consciousness is not there anymore. Okay? Now, the other reason why people have to be worshipped, particularly in the Hindu religion, idol worship. Focusing your attention on God, on something. That is actually nothing but meditation. And that idol worship, particularly in Hindu temples, makes it easy for you to meditate, makes it easy for you to focus your attention without any distraction. So you focus your attention on God, you pray, you worship, you say, you even talk to God sometimes, heart to heart. Okay? You try not to become distracted by any of your external environments. So that's what is happening when you go to the temple. It is good. It makes you humble. It's a nice practice. It makes you humble. You go to the temple, you focus your attention. See, there is another concept in psychology which is auto-suggestion. Auto-suggestion, you suggest something to yourself You believe in yourself, you start practicing it, you start doing it. So when you go to God, you suggest to yourself that you have to be humble. You suggest to yourself that you have to focus your attention on God. You suggest to yourself that you should not be distracted by anything else. You should not give room for any such distractions. So that is auto-suggestion. When you suggest it to yourself, that actually means you become conscious that you have to be practicing something at a particular point in time. So essentially every deed, every thought, every action, it's a question of convincing yourself that you have to do something. So you convince yourself, you go to God, you go to temple, you pray to God, which is an extremely good practice, and it makes you calm, it brings your BP down, it makes you be at peace with yourself and with the knowledge or with the feeling that you have done what you should be doing. So that's what it is all about, going to the temple. But it's not surrender. Surrender is actually far superior concept, far superior state of mind. It's a very, very most enlightened thinking. So that's what it is, surrender. Just because I tell myself, let me actually talk about myself, because the first person account is the most credible, as they say. When I actually talk about myself, I'm not going to talk bad. I'm not going to talk false thing, at least in my case. Okay, I'm going to try to be as objective as possible about myself. So when I try to surrender, when I try to do something, it's actually the process. But the process is a very long one, very lengthy one, and the practice has to be very consistent and with a lot of determination and perseverance. It doesn't come all that easily. I'll actually tell a story. Swami Vivekananda, most of you would know it actually. Swami Vivekananda, whom I actually consider the most liberal, open-minded, spiritual giant. Okay, he traversed the length and breadth of India. He also went up to Chicago to address the Parliament of Religions, which, all of us know this. He said, never accept anything without questioning. Never accept anything without questioning. Always ask the question why. But when you ask the question why, when you try to come up with the answer, try to be as objective as possible, as honest as possible. When you try to address the question without the influence of your ego as possible, as much as possible. Because we all have ego. All of us. There is not one person who has actually completely conquered ego. Only some big sages, revered sages like Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, only these people, I think, could be considered as conquering ego. So, Swami Vivekananda, for about 5-6 years, he never accepted whatever Ramakrishna told him. So, Ramakrishna every day would tell him to go to the temple, Kali temple, and every day Swami Vivekananda would go. So he would ask for something, pray to God, pray to the goddess Kali to give him something or other. Come back to Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna would ask him, what did you ask today? He would say, I asked that, all of that. After about 5-6 years, one day Vivekananda said, today I didn't ask for anything to goddess Kali. Ramakrishna asked, why? Why did you not ask for anything today? Vivekananda said, today I realized Goddess Kali is such an omnipotent power. So, say after all, to such a power, I just go and stand before her and ask her to give me food, clothing and shelter. How silly I could be. So, that's the answer Swami Vivekananda said. So, that is the stage when he loses the idea of I and surrenders himself to Goddess Kali with absolute faith. Faith is another big concept. Let's not go into that right now. Briefly, you can actually say faith, do your duty, do everything, and have the confidence everything is going to happen for good for you. And even if something doesn't seem to be happening for good for you, maybe for your own good in the long run. The faith is such a huge concept there. So that's the supreme greatest confidence that any person could have in God. That is actually absolute faith. So let's not go there right now. So we'll actually talk only about the concept of surrender, ego, looking into oneself, all of that. Okay. So when I said, when I actually talked about going to the temple, does not actually amount to being surrendering yourself totally. What does surrendering yourself totally? Surrender, Bhagavad Gita provides the answer the best. Bhagavan Krishna, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, do your duty without worrying about the results. In very, very simple terms. In a very layman term, that will be the best possible explanation there. Now, there are so many other complicated concepts in Bhagavad Gita like Siddha Prajna, action without consciousness, all of that. It's a very highest state of mind. We can actually do that, practice that. It's not going to be possible for all of us, and nor is it required for me to talk about that in detail right now here. But do your duty without worrying about the result means what? How can you do your duty without any expectations at all? See, when you are engaged in an action, you are trying to focus on the result. You have the result in mind all the time when you engage in an action. See, when you work for about 30 days, you are worried about the money, salary that you are going to get on the first of every month. So, you cannot actually work for all the 30 days without worrying about the salary, without thinking about the salary. Suppose, if you are not going to get the salary, the monetary compensation on the first of every month, would you be able to work here? No. But, Bhagavad Gita says, work, do your duty without worrying about the result, without worrying about the consequences, good or bad, without thinking of the consequences. How can one possibly do that? One can do that if the working itself, the action itself becomes an end result. You become so committed, you become so involved in your actions. Emotionally, you become so involved in your action, like in the case of singing possibly. Then you are not worried about the result, what others are going to think what others are going to say, or what is the kind of compensation that I'm going to get here. So you are not going to worry about all that. So that is actually engaging in action. So this kind of state of mind would be almost akin to surrendering to God to some extent. Because the duty itself becomes your ultimate there. Your action becomes ultimate. You are focusing only on action, which amounts to a kind of meditative thing. So you are just doing that. So when you do that with a lot of conscientiousness, conscience is what I'm actually trying to say here. Okay, when you do that to the best of your ability in whatever way you think is the best and right, and attribute the result to God, then that is surrendering. You don't actually think about the result. You don't think about the result even to the extent of your own personal satisfaction. No. What kind of state of mind that could be? Think about it. It's a total state of detachment. You are not attached to anything, not even to your own actions. Okay? You are doing everything without any attachment, but to the best of your ability. I can actually give a small example here, a very earthly one. I take walk in the morning every day for about an hour. But even while I'm walking, I actually listen to music all the time with my AirPod. So when I listen to music all the time, throughout that 1 hour, I completely lose consciousness of the fact that I'm walking. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm completely oblivious of my own action there. But the action is in progress. It actually goes on. I keep walking. But because of the music, because the mind is actually attuned to something else, it's all the mind. When mind is attuned to something else, you are not conscious of your action. You are not attached to your action. You don't feel the pleasure of walking there. The walking also has other pleasures actually, because it provides clarity of thought, all kinds of things are there. But you are not conscious even of that. You don't think about anything else. You think only about the music, which is very divine at that particular moment. So that is the way action has to be there. When the action is there without worrying about the result, without worrying about the consciousness, and at a slightly higher plane, attributing the results of your action to God, then that is surrendering to some extent. So the basic thing, the fundamental in this is overcome your ego. Unless you overcome your ego, you will not be able to surrender. Unless you do a lot of introspection, unless you develop your enlightenment, spiritual enlightenment to that extent, you will not be able to overcome the ego. None of us, 99.9%. No, we cannot. Not the spiritual gurus, not the Swamiyars we see here and there everywhere. There are hundreds of them now. None of them. See, when the person completely overcomes the ego, what will be left behind? Left is just God consciousness. He'll be able to think only God about God. So, but that you don't really have to feel guilty that you are not able to overcome your ego. You don't have to feel guilty that you are not able to be completely detached from your actions. You are not able to overcome your worries about the result of your actions. No, these are all normal things for normal being. God doesn't really expect you to raise yourself to that extent of enlightenment. No, not at all. We are all average mortals. As long as we don't really harm anybody, we know what we are doing is right in our consciences, in our conscience, deepest consciousness. That's perfectly fine. Just do your duty. That's exactly what Lord Krishna tells Arjuna. If you have to grill your grandfather, you have to grill your grandfather because he is on the wrong side. That's your duty. You don't. There is no scope for any emotions, any attachment, or any subjectivity there. So that state of mind is surrendering to God. You attribute the results of your action to God. That is something that you can do only when you overcome your ego. And how can you overcome your ego? That's a big question. What is ego? Ego, they say for ego, edging God out of your consciousness is how it's actually said for the better understanding of a layman. When you are not thinking about God, when your consciousness is not filled with the thought of God, then all that is left is thought about yourself. That is ego. So when you completely overcome your ego, you think about God, then you have surrendered yourself to God. When you are not thinking, when you are not able to overcome ego, that is no way by which you can actually surrender yourself completely to God. Okay. We can actually talk for hours on this actually, but I'm going to take a few more minutes to talk about a little bit about Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi, the great revered sage of Tiruvannamalai, to whom Somerset Maugham, Paul Brinton, the great intellectual from the West, came all the way, stayed with him for about a month, I am told. I only read all this actually. Okay. So what was the basic teaching of Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi? Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi, know yourself. Essentially, know yourself. Self-inquiry. Now, the same idea of know yourself, knowing oneself, has been said by many great psychologists as well. Many great masters. Socrates said, know yourself. J. Krishnamurti said, know yourself. Introspection, self-inquiry, look into yourself. Bhagavan Maharishi, Ramana Maharishi also said the same thing. Essentially, it all boils down to the same, but except that what Ramana Maharishi said was in a spiritual context, a next to impossible thing for an ordinary mortal like you and me to accomplish in our lifetime. It may take several lifetimes to be able to accomplish that. Okay. Now, what is this self-inquiry? What is looking into yourself? What is it understanding yourself? Understanding the true nature of your being is understanding yourself. The true nature of my being is not just me. See, what is my position in relation to the world? What is my position in relation to God? What am I? Where am I going to come from? Where did I come from? Where am I going to go? And what am I really? In every dimension, psychological, spiritual, social, whatever, in every dimension, every one of your action, we have to be actually looking into ourselves, introspect. Not in terms of if it is right or wrong, but why I am doing what I am doing. What actually makes me do this? What is my true nature? When you are in quest doing this throughout your lifetime, then you are going to discover yourself for what you really are. The question is not what I think I am. No, what I really am. See, again in psychology, you have a concept, self-concept, social concept, real concept, all of that. Self-concept is what I think about myself. Social concept is what others think about myself. Real concept, what I really am. Neither what I think about myself nor what others think about myself may be right. I may really be something else. That's a real concept. So, in the process of your introspection, self inquiry, you have to constantly think what you really are. In that process, when you question all your actions, you don't even have to question your actions, possibly. Sorry, that's not the right term. When you analyze your actions, when you take stock of your actions in terms of right, wrong, or whatever, then your ego should not be influencing your analysis or thought processes. Because, okay, again, I am giving money to somebody. I get the satisfaction. My ego is satisfied. Why I am getting the satisfaction? My ego is satisfied that I have actually given the money to somebody. I am helping somebody. That I consciousness is always there. Now, if I am going to question myself, why am I giving the money to him, this person, today? Is it to satisfy my own ego, or is it just by way of a my good charitable nature, or just a good deed I have to be doing? Am I attributing the result of this particular action to God? Am I questioning myself about my assumption that I'm doing it out of my own strength? I perceive that I'm capable of doing it. I'm doing it. I perceive so. But I must be in a position to question that premise. Because there, if I'm not able to question that, then I will not be able to attribute this action to God. I'll think I'm doing everything. So that I constantly follows you throughout, every minute, every second, throughout. So that every one of your action is the result of that I. Let us be conscious of that. First of all of this requires tremendous honesty on the part of the individual and the intellectual abilities to convince yourself of the importance of honesty. What the honesty means, how it influences one's introspection, looking into oneself, all of this. But having said all this, let's not actually feel guilty. Let's not put ourselves to a lot of pressure with all this. Let's actually try to do our best honestly, nothing more. Objectivity doesn't come in one day. Objectivity comes as a result of consistent, continuous practice, not in one day, 1 month, 1 year, throughout your lifetime. Objectivity, the essential prerequisite, you have to overcome your ego. Everything actually stems from your ego. Let's actually put it this way. When that ego you are able to overcome, you are able to surrender yourself to God. You are able to attribute all your actions to God. There equanimity comes then. Neither you gloat over your successes, nor you are crestfallen by your defeats. You are able to take everything in your stride. I had a great mother whom I would actually, the only person whom I would actually relate to these things. The only person who ever came close to surrendering more in relative terms. I won't say she actually completely surrendered herself. She was totally devoid of all her ego. No, that's not what I would say. But I did know that she was totally detached. She tried to be detached. She made efforts throughout her life, that kind of thing, by her own experiences. So, the bottom line is, don't feel guilty. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. Don't feel stressed out that you are doing it. But try to improve yourself constantly. Try to become more enlightened. Try to become more enlightened by constant thinking, by constant introspection, by constant self-inquiry, questioning your actions, analyzing your actions, looking into yourself, without being self-critical. If you are going to be unduly self-critical of yourself, then that's going to put a lot of pressure on yourself. So no, that's not what it is said. That is what Bhagavan Ramana Maharishi possibly said. Look into yourself without ego, objectively, honestly, constantly, to understand yourself first, then understand the world. When you understand yourself very well, you understand the world, because you also understand the way that you perceive things. You understand the way you see things in this world. So that's what is looking into yourself. That's what every one of us have to do. So surrender is all big terms, very complicated terms, but we can actually strive to reach that level. Every one of us have to strive, but none of us ever accomplish all of that. And let's not actually try to simplify it because of the fact, because we would like to have a very much clear, we have to have a feeling that we are very basically clear on our thoughts. So you essentially want to convince yourself. So so essentially it's ego. So there is one more thing which I actually want to cover here. I just forgot, but this presentation won't be complete without saying that. None of us are expected to. Does religion say that you have to renounce the world? You cannot enjoy? Not at all. Far from it. Have a good time. Enjoy yourself. Be happy with yourself. But enjoy in a good way, healthy way, such that it doesn't really harm anybody. Okay. Um, Religion does not say that you should not make money. You can make money. But religion says, Hindu religion, which is what I have read, the one who keeps more money than he deserves or he needs, uh, it actually amounts to stealing money from others. I do not entirely agree with this because that's kind of a little too harsh and uncharitable upon individuals. I don't really think so. But you can definitely make money. You make money the right way. You make money, you work hard for it. You don't actually cheat anybody. Do your duty, get the money, but don't become too attached to it. Never become too avaricious. But make the money and enjoy it. Enjoy it in a good way. But also try to help people. Try to, if someone is actually less fortunate than yourself, try to have a soft corner for him. Try to go a little out of your way to do whatever best that you can for him. Okay, so you don't really have to renounce. Not every one of us have to become an ascetic or a sage or whatever. No, not at all. That's not what is expected out of us. If somebody thinks otherwise, he's completely mistaken. We can enjoy. We have to be happy, peaceful, and we should do it the right way. Make money the right way, enjoy yourself the right way, but uh, everything has limit. Everything has to be done in a very moderate fashion, and the in a much higher enlightenment level, as I said, I can. I mean, I don't really mind repeating myself once again. Attribute everything to God. At least try to inculcate the attitude to be able to attribute the result of your actions to God, so that you are really very peaceful with yourself right now. Okay. So never be unduly excited about what you have got, or completely defeated by perceived losses. Everything happens for good. Everything happens for a reason. Okay. Thank you very much. Hope it makes sense. I have actually tried my best to make myself clear by this presentation. I myself possibly would feel a little clearer now. So that's what uh, self-reflection possibly means. Okay. Thank you all. Take care. Have a great day and wish you the very best in everything that you do.